I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Ana Andjelic.
Brand revivals don't happen overnight. It takes around 3 years probably, but that means the first year is always critical. And it's always just injecting life very quickly. But then the question is really one of how do you set the organization up to support that new way of operating.
Ana Andjelic is a brand executive, author of The Business of Aspiration, and one of Forbes' world's most influential CMOs. Ana specializes in building brand-driven modern businesses. Most recently, she led the rebrand of Banana Republic and is now the Chief Brand Officer at ESPRIT. Ana earned her doctorate in sociology and is a widely read columnist, speaker, and advisor. My interview with Ana Andjelic is coming right up, but first...
B2B marketers, get ready. The world's leading B2B marketing expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center September 20th and 21st. This is the world's leading event for marketing solutions and innovation, and tickets are free. Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 100 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 150 exhibitors. Hear keynotes from Amazon Music, Google, Netflix, Twitch, and Uber. It's September 20th and 21st at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Free tickets. Go to bit.ly/MPNB2B to register. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/MPNB2B. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Jeff Livingston and Greg Verdino host a great podcast called No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. That's useful. Gentlemen, tell us what listeners will get out of the show.
We discuss all the latest developments that are happening in marketing and AI, particularly the news that's impacting us on our day-to-day basis.
And we break it down and we help marketers see through the hype cycle, and we analyze what's happening through the lens of a couple of guys who have been around in the marketing space for a while.
Then we do a no-brainer and a brainer, 2 takeaways for you to walk off and implement in your daily marketing life.
And then we help you make sense of how to implement it by getting practical and helping brands and agencies think about how to implement AI in their organizations to benefit their companies and their customers.
Awesome. And where can people subscribe?
Find us at nobrainerpodcast.com. Of course, you can find us at marketingpodcasts.net and look for No Brainer any place you listen to your podcasts.
You heard him. Go subscribe.
Ana Andjelic, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for this lovely introduction.
Absolutely. So we were joking a bit beforehand. I wanted to make sure that I was saying the brand name correctly, and I said ESPRIT, and you said it's like I'm from the 80s. And I have to tell you that it was the conversation that my wife and I had over breakfast this morning when I was talking about what I got to do today, which was to talk to the chief brand officer at ESPRIT, and her response was, "I was an ESPRIT kid." So what's it like driving a brand that produces that kind of a spark in so many?
I mean, funny you ask, because when I originally joined, and by the way, I'm so glad your wife said that, and there's so many women, Gen X's, and I don't know if your wife is Gen X
Yes.
or a millennial, but either way, they say, "Oh, I was a spree girl," and now I'm like, "Okay, girl, pick a number," because I've heard it so many times, and I mean, it's amazing how Esprit spoke to all of them. They can be from New York, they can be from Europe, they can be from LA, they can be, from Chicago, and they'll be like, "I was the Esprit girl." And I guess that aesthetic really resonated. Right time, right place, right brand. And when I started a year ago, when I posted on my LinkedIn, "Oh, I'm joining Esprit," I was completely floored not by the fact that people were like, hey, love the brand. No. They were like, I love my embroidered sweatshirt that I wore on my first day of freshman year of high school and so on. They remember specific products 40 years later or
Yeah,
30 years later.
it's
So I never got that before. When I joined Banana Republic, people were like, oh, I love Banana Republic, but they didn't remember the specific item. So I bet that your wife certainly has an item that she lived in back then.
Absolutely, yeah. She went on to text me a photo that looks like an ad from the mid '80s that has three females in it wearing bold colored striped sweaters, berets, and they're holding balloons, and it looks like a time capsule. But I think.
I need to
Uh,
have that. All right, now that you mentioned, I need to have it. You need to send me that photo.
I will do that once we hop off here. But talk a bit about the history of the Esprit brand, because it certainly harkens back to some of these strong feelings. Uh, but there was a period of time. Did it go away, or was it changing? Or talk a bit about the timeline of the brand.
Well, I mean, if it starts from the beginning, that's 1968, which is
Wow.
1 year before Gap was founded, and the founders are from San Francisco. The Esprit was founded in San Francisco, the same as Gap. And why am I bringing this up? It's like there must be something in the water, that those guys were drinking, because North Face was founded first by Esprit founders, and then they founded Esprit, and it was very much that Northern California aesthetic, which was a lot of layering, a lot like metropolitan outdoor. Esprit called their look metropolitan outdoor at the time, and it was like oversized, comfortable. Urban and outdoors at the same time, and that's a lot what we call gorpcore right now. So why is that important? Is it's kind of showing that the signature aesthetic was born back then, and it's not accidental that Esprit managed to grow into such a powerful brand, although it did go away in United States. It went away in early 2000s, completely closed the stores there, and it went away in Asia. In Europe, they adopted a strategy which was very much modeled to fast fashion of Zara, and we all know how that story ends. So we have in different markets in North America and Asia that nostalgia that your wife is talking about, and that brand love, because equity never was devalued. And then in Europe, we have a unbelievable brand recognition, very wide brand awareness, but very low brand equity because of the 15 years of neglecting the brand and just chasing sale targets. It became like what Gap is here, probably. So our challenge is twofold, really.
It absolutely is, and it's interesting because it's a twofold challenge, but it's a unique one because of that brand equity, that brand love that you were talking about. It almost, it's making me think of like the embers in a fire that you can maybe get them rekindled to grow, because you're not starting from nothing. So what does the process of restarting a brand in North America look like?
It's very considered and it's very long term. So brand revivals don't happen overnight. It takes around like 3 years probably, but that means the first year is always critical. And it's always like, just injecting life very quickly. But then the question is really one of how do you set the organization up to support that new way of operating? How do you set all departments, merchandising, product design, marketing, supply, distribution, logistics, to kind of deliver on that new position. So that is sort of interplay between the back of the office and front of the office. And the CEO of ESPRIT, William Puck, has been working very hard in the past couple of years to set the organization for the brand revival, to return it to profitability, to operational organizationally streamline it, to start the transformation from the old school retail structures to the new one. So he really set the stage for us to come in on the brand team and do the rebrand and repositioning. And why am I saying all of this? Because too often people think that rebranding is actually a marketing thing, but no, it's just putting lipstick on a pig. You
Yeah.
need to really change the process, the way that the brand and design and the merchandising and e-commerce and marketing all work together in order to modernize the brand truly inside and outside. So in the US, to answer your question, we tapped into those embers. We kind of blew the embers there to start conversation with culture again through our vintage items and through our new collection together. So we had for 6 months a pop-up on Prince Street that basically it was there and people were seeing the ESPRIT flag and they were like, oh my God, the ESPRIT is back. And that was during holidays and it was throughout the winter and spring, and we had a lot of positive feedback, which was very encouraging. That pop-up at the same time served as a hypothesis, served for us to test the hypothesis that we indeed can go as a full price premium brand in the North American market, and that reissuing archives that bring in vintage back into our assortment in stores is a good idea and a way to attract two audiences, Gen X and Gen Z, together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's sort of unique with the customer demographics that you're talking about there because you've got the vintage items, you've got that strong affinity in the Gen X customer. And I wondered, how you can kind of re-spark that excitement in Gen X, but look for a way to spread that to Gen Z consumers who might not have that same background, that same nostalgia, that same strong feeling that the Gen Xers do.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't want to say easier than you think because none of this is easy.
Sure.
It's more that we are calling our customer strategy 2 for 1, which basically aesthetically and messaging wise, we are targeting those two audiences similarly, which is in both cases, we are tapping into nostalgia. For one, target group that's a real lived in nostalgia. They were there in the 80s and 90s. For the other is that imagined nostalgia that they gravitate towards through their shopping habits, buying secondhand, and that desire for self-expression, discovery, finding something unique in the resale market. So everything in the 80s and 90s from Esprit is unbelievably high quality. So it's still in circulation online on eBay, on Depop, on ThreadUp, and so on. And then the third one is the style, that Esprit look, which is that metropolitan outdoor that is very unisex, very masculine, feminine, oversized, layered, with vivid colors, pastel colors, everything that Gen X is wearing now without even knowing they're wearing Esprit.
That's interesting, and I love the 2 for 1 label or the framing there because at first I was like, huh? But then with what you just said about what's valued and what people are the Gen Z customers are wearing, it does track with what you said earlier about it being easier than one might think or than it might sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, also the thing here is that a brand that has a heritage, that has a history, they have a permission, so to speak, to create many doors into the brand. That aesthetic confidence, directness, and clarity of the aesthetic world is unbelievably important, and that goes across generations.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs, then medium wigs, also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
B2B marketers, get ready. The world's leading B2B marketing expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center September 20th and 21st. This is the world's leading event for marketing solutions and innovation, and tickets are free. Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 100 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 150 exhibitors. Hear keynotes from Amazon Music, Google, Netflix, Twitch, and Uber. It's September 20th and 21st at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Free tickets. Go to bit.ly/MPNB2B to register. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/MPNB2B. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
Now, back to the show. So I want to talk a bit about your background in sociology, because you really brought a lot of that insight to bear in your book, The Business of Aspiration, talking about how social, cultural, and environmental capital changes brands. And I think this is fascinating because I don't have a traditional brand background education wise either, but I studied psychology, which I ultimately think is about the next best thing that you could study. And things like sociology are also fascinating. So how do you connect the dots between sociology and brand building?
Well, I don't know how would I otherwise be doing brand building if I did not have this training in sociology, and especially what my area of specialization was. My dissertation was on modern branding, on digital branding. That was basically showing how to build brands through experiences, not through just messaging and communication. And that kind of created a field that I use in my everyday work now. So, in addition to that academic rigor and academic discipline and very analytical, strategic, structured thinking, it's basically focusing on areas of how influence spreads in society. What is the interaction between people and technology? How people design their own values into technology, how technology is not neutral, and how it shapes our view of the world. Then organizational sociology was a big part of what I was studying, as well as behavioral economics. And then I took classes at the business school about media strategy, which is applicable to brands as well. So it was a mix of influences that actually provided me with ammunition and that framework for thinking, again, as I said, in addition to that expected academic discipline.
So, talk a bit about the idea of aspiration. That is, when you talk behavioral behaviorally focused consumers and thinking about that, aspiration is a big driver. And I think we talk about that a lot, but as marketers, we don't always maybe understand it as well as we should. So, what role does aspiration play in brand building?
It plays an unbelievably important role in how people consume things, ideas, each other, their own relationships. Human beings, they strive for both belonging and for differentiation. So being like the others and separating ourselves from the others. In both cases, we are seeking status, and that is the aspirational part. What is our aspirational positioning within our group, our work group, our friends group, our neighborhood, our community, and so on, culture, and so on. So aspiration is inherent part of society, of community, of culture, in a sense that it connects our individual behavior with our social behavior. We are always going to be known for something. We are always aspiring to have a specific role in our society or in all of our communities and social networks. And what we are aspiring is to kind of, what is that role? Are we going to be a creator? Are we going to be a curator? Are we going to be known as someone who always knows where to go out or what to wear, has a great fashion sense, or who has read the most interesting books and knows what is, what book is there to read, or what is happening next, or what movies are the best movies, and have a specific niche interest and knowledge and information. So that is that social capital that we acquired. And then also economic capital, the things we buy, but then also cultural capital, the things we know. So it is inherent in how we are signaling our roles and our status, and how we are also recognizing the status and roles of others.
Because I would think, especially when we talk about status and clothing brands, your two most recent brand leadership positions, talking about Banana Republic and now Esprit, that our status that we, I'm trying to decide what the right verb is, that we write for ourselves of that role that we want to play. Our clothing signals a big part of that. How does a clothing brand kind of connect the dots of this is, this is who we can help you be? I don't know if I've phrased that
Well, I
effectively,
think
but
it's
maybe you can
more.
take that clumsy hand off.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And I mean, you did phrase it right. But I also think that in a sense, it's more than just clothes you wear. It's what, again, it's like, this is very much often repeated, but it's like who the brand is, who is wearing this brand, what does the brand stand for, what other things the brand is doing. It's not just enough to say, hey, this is a pair of sneakers or a pair of pants, go buy it, People don't make decisions based on just how things look. They make decisions of what things mean. What is the social meaning, cultural meaning, at the end of the economic meaning, like high price in certain contexts signifies quality and craftsmanship and strength of the brand, and in other is like, I'm not paying this much for this. So that's kind of like looking at not just what the actual thing is, what is being worn, but more importantly, who is wearing it, how is it wearing it, why.
So, as I think about this, and this question forms itself a lot easier for me. So, if you're someone like my wife, a Gen Xer who, Esprit, that's who I was, and after that initial wave of nostalgia, what if that person ends up thinking, is that still who I am? how do you kind of signal to lead them back to the brand that there was something here that was part of your identity, and though it's 30, 40 years later, there still is?
Well, I mean, we all change, and it would be really tragic if we all stayed the same people we were teenagers, And like, even with this, with Esprit, like people don't love necessarily Esprit; they love themselves and who they were when they were growing up. And I think it's very touching in a sense. We all have like this romantic ideas of our high school years, college years, when we were, like life had so much potential and we were young and beautiful, and the entire year, we did whatever we were doing. We were having so much fun. So obviously, the plan is not to stay with that nostalgia. Nostalgia is important to kind of say, hey, we are back, and we are back on your terms because you remember yourself when you were wearing Esprit. But it would be really lazy from a brand strategy standpoint to stay with that. Like, that's why all our campaigns are a nod to nostalgia. We recognize it, but we transform it when 2023 and beyond. And in that sense, it is more about how do we take that DNA? How do we take what made this brand successful in the first place and transport it into what is relevant to people now? What is relevant to Gen X now? What is relevant to Gen Z now? It's not going to be the same thing as the 80s. We can use 80s as the product itself, but we can't build a brand on the 80s. 80s are gone. Whatever was happening in economy, society, and culture there, we take that as inspiration, as cues, but not as a strategy.
That last point was great. How you mentioned the importance, the distinction in strategy, because we talk a lot about the value of nostalgia, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are, going back, freezing the 80s, and we're going to go back to that exactly. Because to your point, people change, so it's about moving that forward and kind of brand and customer almost growing together.
I mean, yeah, that's it. I mean, it's kind of lazy strategy just to coast on that, from a brand strategy standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just be 80s nostalgia. It has
But
to be
that's
more.
at the same time part of heritage and recognizing that brand
Yeah,
heritage. And I mean, that's what makes us Esprit and not some other brand. So that those are the guardrails of what
abs
the brand DNA is. So.
absolutely. Well said. Well, this trip down fashion memory lane, both past, present, and future, has made me smile many times, Anna. But it is now time for me to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Oh, brand mischief always makes me smile, not just recently. With their, I don't know if I should call them a brand, but since they're doing collaborations, they probably are a brand. They call themselves an art collective, and everything they do is almost like sociological critique of the society. So the last thing they released was with Victoria Beckham, these gigantic boots that like Mickey Mouse boots that I don't know if you've seen, but that always makes me smile because they're always very spot on. That's like a social critique in a tangible form.
Oh, I love that. That is great. And, it's not always a requirement to be an on brand smile, but that certainly, given what we've talked about with sociology and brands here over the past half hour, is certainly very much on point as well. Anna, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Thank you very much for asking that because I am across social media. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, and my username is my last name, ANDJELICAAA. Same is on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my book, The Business of Aspiration, on Amazon. And especially, you can subscribe to my newsletter, The Sociology of Business, on Substack.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Ana, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.